Introduction to Chinese Education. Many Chinese scholars believe the history of education in China can be traced back at as far as the prehistoric times, as they knew how to start a fire, fish, and hunt, and passed the skills down by teaching. Yet, the beginning of school education was probably from earlier than Xia and Shang dynasties, when the two oldest forms of schools, Chen, Jun, and Xiang, were established. Later, in Eastern Zhou dynasty, the government managed and regulated the education system. Throughout this period of time, education was the privilege of the elites. The elite students were supposed to master the 6 classics, 6艺, also named as the 6 arts or the 6 forms of learning, including 礼, rites, 乐, music, 射, archery, 语, writing, 书, writing, and 数, arithmetic. They are considered an advanced way of civilizing and self-realization. During the spring and autumn and warring states periods, private schools prospered, and the teachings of Confucianism gained popularity among intellectuals, and later gained the emperor's recognition in Han Dynasty. The official curriculum were mainly based on the 4 books and the 5 classics. The 4 books and the 5 classics were the acknowledged subjects of the Confucian culture in the feudal society in ancient China. The 4 books refers to the Great Learning, 大学, the Doctrine of the Mean, 中庸, Confucian Analects, 论语, and the works of Mencius, 孟子. And the 5 classics includes the Book of Poetry, 诗经, also known as the Book of Songs, the Book of Odes, the Book of History, 史记, the Book of Rites, 礼记, the Book of Changes, 易经, and the Spring and Autumn Annals, 春秋. Confucianism probably is the biggest influence in education of China throughout the entire Chinese history. Although it received certain criticisms in the 20th century, many educational ideas were ageless, such as teaching students in accordance of their aptitude, and instruction knows no class distinction. 因材施教，有教无类. Confucian ethic and educational ideas have won worldwide influence, which are easy to be found in the cultures of many Asian countries, such as Japan, South Korea, and many Southeast Asian countries. Later in Han Dynasty, a form of public education system was established. Not only elites from upper-class families can study in school, common men can also use education as a path to become a better man, known as gentleman, 君子. On the other hand, the common people should follow the traditions and rules. In ancient Chinese culture, there was no need for the common people to know why. For common people, studying Confucianism and be a gentleman had been the most efficient way for them to be officials and advance into upper class. During Han Dynasty, the first civil service exam was set up. Confucianism was no surprise, was one of the key subjects to study for the civil service exam. Provincial schools were established countrywide, and the Confucianism tradition of education was spread all over China. To enrich your family, there is no need to buy good land. Books hold 1,000 measures of grain. For an easy life, there is no need to build mansion. In books are found houses of gold. When you go out, do not be upset if no one follows you. In books, there will be a crowd of horses and carriages. If you wish to marry, don't be upset if you don't have a go-between. In books, there are girls with faces like jade. A young man who wishes to be somebody will devote his time to the classics. He will face the window and read. There were people who spent their entire lifetime studying on Confucianism in order to get respected, not only for themselves, but also for the pride of their family lines. The civil service exam system started from Han Dynasty, reformed and refined in Sui and Tang dynasties, and lasted until the Qing dynasty. In Tang dynasty, the system of Academy of Classical Learning, Shu Yuan, was established, and upon its peak at Song dynasty, it had made a multitude of innovation and enhancement in institutionalized education. The imperial examination system, 科举制, was fully developed in Tang Dynasty as a well-rounded and fair channel for talent selection. However, the limitations of the system, such as the disregard for reasoning and explanation, the utilitarian purpose of education had sowed bad seeds for its consequences. Changes had been made. More Western influence were brought into the Chinese education system during the Qing dynasty. After the humiliating defeat under the hands of British Army in the Opium War, scholars and government officials suggested a major restructure of education system, developing new areas such as foreign language, science, and technology. In 1911, the Qing dynasty itself was overthrown by revolution, and a republican form of government was established. At that time, government completely abandoned the traditional way of education. New educational models from European, America, and Japan were set up in China. Students in China also opened their eyes to the new knowledge and technology in the Western world. Modern education was gradually launched, with the intellectuals learning Western languages, going overseas, translating foreign books, and starting modern schools. There had been great discussions between the benefits and damages of Chinese and Western education systems, and the perceptions of the Chinese people refreshed time after time. In 1916, under the reform of the then principal Cai Yuanpei, Peking University was turned to a new university with progressive ideas and modernized management. With the adoption of the policy of reform and opening to the outside world in 1978, basic education entered a new era of progress. In 1985, the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party issued the decision on the reform of the education structure, laying down the principle that local governments should be responsible for basic education. The new policy was an incentive for local governments, especially those of the counties and townships. In 1986, the National People's Congress promulgated the compulsory education law of the People's Republic of China, thus placing basic education in the country on a firm legal basis. China started a system of 9-year compulsory education. China education is the largest education system in the world. On June 2018, there were 9.75 million students taking the National Higher Education Entrance Exam, 高考, in China. Investment in education accounts for about 4% of total GDP in China. In 1986, the Chinese government passed a compulsory education law, making 9 years of education mandatory for all Chinese children. Today, the Ministry of Education estimates that above 99% of the school-age children have received universal 9-year basic education. On April 2019, Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China announced a total of 492,185 international students were studying in China in 2018. International students have enrolled in over 1,004 higher education institutions in China. China has a long history of providing education to international students, starting in high schools and universities. Over the past few years, the number of international students who study abroad in China has significantly increased every year. The higher education sector has growth as well. China has increased the proportion of its college-age population in higher education to over 20% now from 1.4% in 1978. At the same time, China is improving its quality of education through a major effort at school curriculum reform. China has a consistent teacher development system. Teaching has historically been and remains today a highly respected profession in China. Once teachers are employed in school, there is a system of induction and continuous professional development in which groups of teachers work together with master teachers on lessons plans and improvements. That's the end of the class. See you next time.